Hey, let's have a look at some HSC practice questions about dealing with right angle trigonometry. So this one here, we're going to calculate the value of h correct to 2 decimal places. I've got my angle of reference. In this case, it's 28 degrees, but I've got information there about the opposite and the hypotenuse only, but I've got nothing about the adjacent. So if I think about my trig ratios, so, car and toa, sine, cos and tan, I can't use anything that needs an A or an adjacent value because I've got nothing about that. So I can scratch cos and tan. I'm going to have to use sine. In this case, I can say my angle of reference, I'm told, is 28 degrees. So my sine of 28 degrees equals the opposite over the hypotenuse, in this case my 5 over my h. Now importantly, if the unknown is on the bottom, okay, we swap it with the trig ratio. Okay, it doesn't change or break the rules of algebra. It's just a little shortcut. Say if you're doing the steps, just swap them. Okay, so in other words, I swap these two pieces across, and now I end up with h equals 5 over sine 28. You just pop that in your calculator, and you'll get a value of 10.65. So the value of h, or the length of the hypotenuse, is 10.65. Right, here's another HSC question. What's the value of theta to the nearest degree? So in this case, I've actually got information. I can see I've got information about all three sides. So really, I suppose I could use any of the trig ratios, sine, cos, or tan, because I've got an opposite, adjacent, and a hypotenuse. I'm just going to pick one at random. In this case, I'm going to pick cos. And I might do it again with another one at the end, just to check, to make sure that it still works okay. Cos my theta, cos of theta in this case. So I've got an adjacent and a hypotenuse. Okay, my adjacent is 108. I can see it there. My hypotenuse is 135. Plug them in. Now, this is where we have to remember to use the inverse trig. So on your calculator, to get the inverse, you probably have to press shift. So in other words, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cos and I'm going to drag it across to the other side. It becomes inverse cos. That is on your calculator. You'll have to use the shift button and it just becomes a calculation. I get 36.87, so I can see on my list there that to the nearest degree, it's 37 degrees. Now, I'm going to use tan just to double check it, because like I said at the start, I could have used any one because I'm given all three sides. So let's check that. Let's use tan to check it out. So tan is my opposite over adjacent. I've got my opposite is 81. My adjacent is 108. So I can just use the same idea. I'm taking this tan and I'm dragging it across here. It becomes inverse tan. It's like the undoing or the opposite of tan. Put that into my calculator. I get the same value. I'm pretty confident I'm okay with that one. All right, good job. Finally, what expression could be used to calculate the value of x in this triangle? All right, let's go through the process again. Now, this one might take a little bit of trial and error, because let's say I decide, because actually, if I have a look, I've got two angles of reference. I've got the 50 and the 40. Let's say I picked the 50, just at random. I'm going to have a look and see, well, okay, I've got an opposite and a hypotenuse, but I've got nothing about an adjacent. So thinking of my my trig ratios, if I've got an opposite and a hypotenuse, I'd have to use sine. But if I have a look at these options, none of them have sine in it. So that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to undo all of that, scratch that, and let's go back and let's try then the other angle. We'll use that as my angle of reference. Let's use the 40. So I've now got an adjacent and a hypotenuse. Nothing about the opposite, but that's okay because I can use cos, because cos is adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's fill that in now with the things I know. Cos 40 equals my adjacent over my hypotenuse, so I get the x over 29. Now I'm having a look at my list of my options. None of them look like that. None of them say cos 40 equals x over 29. So let's take it the next step as if we were going to solve it. And this time, since the unknown is on the top, all we have to do is take this denominator and just drag it over in front of the trig ratio. So we drag the denominator across and it looks like this. Now, I've actually got something in my list that looks exactly like that. Answer A says 29 times cos 40. All right, great job. All right, in this one, I've got another trig question. I know it's a trig question because it's a right angle triangle. So anytime you see a right angle triangle, you could be thinking about Pythagoras or about your trig ratios, sine, cos, and tan. So in this one, I'm asked to find the distance of the buoy away from the base of the cliff. Now, the little twist in this one to be careful of, it sometimes get confused about this angle of depression. Which angle are we talking about? So let's go through this one and let's just look at all the things that are in the question that are important. We're told the angle of depression is 42 degrees. We're also told it's from the top of the cliff. So I'm going to start at the top of the cliff up here. So if I was standing, if I was standing up here and looking out across the horizon, I'd have a line straight out. From that, I don't know if you can see that, my angle of depression goes down, because if you're feeling depressed, you're down. Okay, so the depression is down. The angle from the horizontal down is the 42 degrees. That's my angle of depression. That's probably the trickiest part of this question, is identifying that. Now, that angle is not on the inside of my triangle. It's actually on the outside. However, because of alternate angles, I've got a Z pattern here, don't I? Okay, so that means I know that this angle is also 42 degrees because they are alternate angles and they're equal. Now I've got an angle of reference I can use for my trigonometry. So looking at this, I've got an opposite. The distance from the base of the cliff to the buoy is my unknown, so let's call it x. And because I'm working with an opposite and an adjacent, I'm going to use tan, because I don't have any information at all about my hypotenuse here. So I can't use anything with an h in it. This has to be a tan question. So tan of my 42 degrees equals the opposite over the adjacent. And I know that it's 67 over x. Now, because my unknown is on the bottom, the little trick here is I swap it with the trig ratio. Okay, so I take this x and I swap it with this trig ratio. So when I do that, I get x equals 67 over tan 42. Punch that into your calculator. I get 74.4 meters. And having a look at my options, to the nearest meter, we're looking at 74 meters.